The 2136 Climate Change Summit was the latest in an ongoing saga, complete with the usual finger-pointing and empty promises. The United Nations had taken on a role as a central world government, following the satellite wars of the late 21st century. Russia, China, and the United States were still rebuilding their crippled power grids in its aftermath. After realizing the extent of our dependence on technology, the world's countries signed the Treaty of Shanghai to govern cyber warfare. As part of the accord, the UN was given greater authority to mediate disputes in the hopes of preventing escalation in the future. Following several natural disasters this year, the General Assembly convened to discuss solutions. Investment in fusion energy was the main item on the docket, though I doubted any parties would commit beyond fancy words. Despite my jaded view, as UN Secretary General, my presence was mandatory at all of these events. I was zoned out while the Canadian ambassador spoke, nodding and smiling every now and then to keep up appearances. An aide tapped me on the shoulder, startling me out of my trance. "Sir," she whispered, "I need you to come with me." What was so important that it couldn't wait an hour? My staff were instructed to only approach in an emergency. There was the brief moment of worry, as I wondered whether there was a credible threat to my life. My security detail seemed relaxed, though, so that likely was not the case. I followed her into a briefing room where several serious-looking individuals were waiting. The amount of military personnel present made me think that some conflict had erupted. The strange thing was that representatives of various space agencies were present, including ESA, NASA, and CNSA. The gears started to turn in my head. The first extrasolar mission had departed a few weeks ago, but they weren't supposed to return for months. Something must have gone wrong. I settled down at the head of the mahogany table. Quite the crowd we've got here. Could someone please fill me in? The Odyssey crew made contact with extraterrestrials. A short-haired woman in a leather jacket passed me a folder. Her name tag read, Dr. Quemper, SETI. They call themselves the Venlil. According to our new friends, there are hundreds of other intelligent species out there. We're not alone, Mr. Secretary. This is the biggest news of all time. I leafed through the dossier, taking a moment to process the news. The first page was a grainy image of the astronauts standing with a group of Venlil. The aliens were bipedal, like us. But that was where the similarities ended. They had woolly gray fur, side-facing eyes, and spindly legs that bent inward. I wasn't even sure if they had noses. Any information released to the public needed to be handled with the utmost care. Science fiction had gotten people used to the idea of aliens, but the revelation of hundreds of species at once, that would shatter any notion of humanity being special. Some people would be frightened, and we needed to make sure they looked to us for the answers. The last thing we needed was for conspiracy theorists and UFO hunters to take control of the discussion. The situation could devolve into a panic fast. Not to mention how delicate communication with the aliens would be. Their culture was entirely new. We could offend them without even realizing. It was no small task ahead of us, learning their language, establishing diplomatic relations, and monitoring potential threats. It would be the work of an entire generation. I count at least 40 generals in this room, which seems unnecessary, I said at last. Are the aliens friendly? Dr. Quemper frowned. It's not so simple, I'm afraid. What do you mean? That shouldn't be a hard question. I had been expecting a yes, not a non-committal reply. My heart sank as her implication hit me. Either they're friendly or they're hostile. The aliens are friendly, except for one species. That species is at war with the rest of the galaxy, and they're quite the formidable foe. They wiped out 62 worlds, and fighting them has cost billions of lives. They destroyed 62 planets by themselves? Jesus Christ. Please tell me you're kidding. I wish, sir. There's a full brief on the page labeled Arc-Sur in your file. There's also footage of them committing every war crime in the book. I mean, they literally eat children. Shit. Let's face it. We're barely spacefaring. We need to hammer out alliances with the other aliens, pronto. I want every diplomat relegated to this project. Well, that's the thing. Dr. Quimper gave me an apologetic smile, as though she was about to give more bad news. How could this get any worse? The Federation is afraid of us. The Venlil governor thinks they wouldn't want our friendship, even with her blessing. In fact, she says they might attack us on sight. Why exactly? I asked. Humans are predators, and the only other intelligent predator— Let me guess. The Arxur, I sighed. The SETI researcher nodded. With a heavy heart, I leaned back in my chair. Humans could be petty and violent, but even on our worst days, we didn't eat children. You could at least give us that. A bitter smirk played at my lips. So, I'm hearing not to invite the Venlil to the family barbecue? Yes, Doctor? Dr. Kemper stifled a laugh. And not to make that comment to them either, sir. I doubt they'd be amused. The poor furballs thought we were there to kill them. But we won them over, didn't we? Are you certain we can't bring the Federation around too? I don't like the odds, us taking on a technologically superior species alone. I'm positive. Tarva was quite emphatic. Our astronauts say her primary concern was for the safety of Earth, as a whole. She believes there could be some drastic overreactions. After what they've been through, I can't say I blame them. In that case, humanity shouldn't expect a welcome party from our neighbors. It was a shame our evolutionary link with the Arxur precluded that possibility, or even the prospect of civil relations. The fact that first contact hadn't ended in violence was miraculous by the sound of it. Things could have fallen apart without the astronauts ever realizing why. We'd know only that the aliens attacked a research vessel without cause. This would be a very different briefing. I made a mental note to give Governor Tarva a proper thanks for staying her hand and filling us in. While I didn't want to rule out swaying the aliens, gambling with Earth's security was out of the question. Mankind were on our own against a genocidal scourge. Well then, this is the rare occasion I'm open to suggestion from the peanut gallery. My eyes locked with the American and Chinese generals who appeared to be discussing something. Do you have a proposal? General Zhao cleared his throat. It's not all bad news. From what we've seen, the Federation's tactics and weaponry are subpar. We should spend a few months building a proper fleet and running joint exercises. I think if we catch the Arxur by surprise, we might stand a chance. I agree. General Jones offered a supportive nod, and I raised an eyebrow at her. This might be the first time I'd seen the U.S. and China work together since the war. Once we're ready, UN forces can coordinate an offensive. We've found several potential targets, including planets where sentients are bred as food. A ground assault is the perfect way to test our forces without showing our hand. We don't want to overcommit, General Zhao added. If we can liberate some Federation citizens and bring them home, it might buy us some goodwill. We all agree that these Arxur are a menace, but I must ask, should we really get involved at all? I paused, choosing my next words carefully. So far, they've left us alone. By launching an attack, we'll be announcing our presence to those monsters. We drag Earth into a galactic war and risk untold human lives. Do we chance becoming Dead World number 63 for a bunch of aliens who hate us? In my opinion, they'll come for us eventually. We either fight them now or we fight them later, General Jones replied. The difference is, if we choose later, we won't have anyone to stand with us. The Federation is not faring well. I grimaced. The Arxur's sadism was bound to awaken unsavory sentiments when it was plastered across the airwaves. How were we going to prevent widespread hysteria? My original plan was to break this discovery to the masses gradually, but with such a serious crisis, people deserved fair warning. After all, humanity's existence hinged on the decisions that were made today. I hoped the public could handle the truth. If we're going to do this, we need unity at home. People need to know what they're signing up for. I pressed a hand to my temple, trying to suppress a growing headache. Release everything to the public and let them make the decision. If there's broad support for a war, then we'll fight the bastards. Perhaps the revelation of aliens would make us set aside our differences and face this threat as a united species. As far as I knew, Earth only had one chance to get this right. The first humans to appear on a Venlil broadcast were concealed by a vac suit and did not speak a word. The watching world had just crawled from our bunkers, only to find our leaders linking arms with predators. The immediate closure of the borders was the sole thing that prevented a mass exodus and word from getting back to the Federation. There was a great deal of skepticism from the public, as Governor Tarva proclaimed that these beasts were peaceful. We were all waiting for them to throw their lot in with the Arksur and prove her wrong. Instead, the United Nations pledged military aid days later and showered Venlil Prime with food donations. Our citizens slowly warmed to the primates, touched by their outpouring of generosity. The sum of their good works quieted the voices calling for human extinction, for the most part. The Terran astronauts were relentless, too, on a television tour espousing peace. Their behavior reflected well on their species as a whole. But at the end of the day, few wanted to meet a predator in the flesh. As human volunteers took to the stars, the scientific communities of two worlds worked to smooth over our first interactions. We found ourselves inundated by Terran entertainment, granting us a peek behind their bestial exterior. The first literature Earth shared with us was Frankenstein, which I'm pretty sure was a thinly veiled analogy. How do you convince the world that you're not a monster when they decide with a single glance? The scientists decided it would make a difference mentally for us to bond and to see them as people. A program was launched to talk to a human via text chat, no videos or images. Their appearance was the stuff of nightmares, so it was easier to start without that in mind. Out of morbid curiosity and perhaps some pity for Frankenstein's wretch, I had volunteered. The human I spoke to was named Marcel. He was a soldier with a dry sense of humor, a passion for environmental causes, and a philosophical mind. Against the odds, I liked him. We became inseparable. I confided my deepest thoughts and learned a great deal about Terran life in return. We finally docked. God, that was terrifying, Marcel texted. Longest 4 hours of my life. It'll be worth it. I'm excited to meet you, I replied. Me too, bud. I know it won't be easy for you. If you need space, or it's too much, please tell me. I will. After weeks of distant communication, the final phase was exposure therapy. The plan was for us to room with our human counterpart for several days. I would be alone with a predator with no escape. They said once you got past the first few hours, the nerves would settle down. We needed to get used to the humans, if they were ever to be accepted. What do you think I look like? Marcel asked. In your head? I don't know. I try not to think about it. Why not? You know what humans look like from TV. Well, it's weird to think that you're a predator, that you look at a dead animal, all that blood and guts, and think, hey, that's food. I'm a vegetarian, Slanek. Not applicable. Gah. Not you specifically, I mean humans in general. The fact that you're wired to think that's appetizing. To kill other animals for a meal. It's not like that, but it's just evolution. Biology sucks. It does. I guess I'll know what you look like soon, Marcel. Yep, a face only a mother could love. I snorted, amused in spite of myself. The clicking of boots down the hall meant the humans were in the building. There were mere seconds to brace myself. I switched off my holopad and tried to regulate my breathing. We were allowing enough of them in to handily overtake this space station if they were to try. These were social predators, so perhaps encouraging them to travel in packs wasn't the best idea. The door swung open. I was flabbergasted by the imposing wall of muscle that entered. Something deep in my subconscious howled at the sight of a predator, blocking my only escape route. Startling hazel eyes scanned my figure, and my breath hitched in my throat. Marcel's lips twitched for a moment, and I could tell from how he pursed them he didn't want to smile. We had been warned repeatedly about the human's teeth-bearing display of friendliness. Slanek. The voice was harsh and raspy, as though he was gargling salt water. I know the feeling's not mutual, but God, you're adorable. I gritted my teeth, trying not to back away. Thanks. Come in. The human saw that I had set my belongings on the bottom bunk and tossed his duffel bag on top. Well, this isn't that bad, I thought. There had been no sudden movements. He was keeping his distance, and he didn't have the razor teeth of the Arksur. With his back to me, I couldn't see his piercing eyes. All positives. My heart was hammering in my chest, but I had kept myself together. "Geesh, I'm starving," the human announced as he began to unpack. There were few words I would have liked to hear less. Isolated in close quarters with a hungry vegetarian predator. Oh, fuck. Why had I signed up for this? The nearest meal was obviously me. I skittered backward on instinct, trying to shield my throat. Marcel frowned. "I was just going to suggest that we grab a bite together. Or, I brought snacks. We can share." "Sorry," I squeaked. The human retrieved a plastic bag from his belongings and popped it open with a single tug. He withdrew a yellow wafer, shoving it down his gullet. As he turned the bag to face me, I eyed the offering suspiciously. "It's a potato chip," he said before I could ask. "Baked from a Terran plant." Did I trust the predator enough to consume his foodstuff? How did I know it wasn't dried animal fat? I tried to remind myself that this was my friend, the one who gave me relationship advice and told silly jokes. My stomach squirmed as I grasped a chip, but I placed it in my mouth anyways. It was salty and starchy, yet strangely addictive. My ears twitched with pleasant surprise. "That's good." "Isn't it?" Marcel mumbled through a mouthful of food. "I figure we could use some carbs before these, experiments you want us in." They mentioned something about that. It's psychological research, isn't it? I don't know. Your scientists just mentioned it was a test. The UN signed off on it, so I'd hope it's ethical. They probably just want to be sure you don't want to eat us. I'll pass with flying colors then. Not sure where the lab is, though. I'll take you there. Great. Let's get it over with, shall we? Once the fright began to subside, speaking to Marcel felt less forced. It tickled my instincts, but not in a way my conscious brain couldn't override. A little discomfort was nothing I couldn't handle. It wasn't like he had actually done anything to threaten me, or diverged from his online persona in a noticeable way. Chatting via text was easier, but it was unfair to ostracize the humans forever. The predators had been understanding enough as things were. Unless any red flags were uncovered in their psychological screening, Terran soldiers would accompany Venlil ships on today's mid-rotation patrols. It was possible UN peacekeepers would remain as permanent fixtures in our crew. In that case, I would be relieved to have a conclusive answer on the workings of the human mind. Predators were known to toy with their prey in nature. The more intelligent they were, the more sadistic and deceptive they could be. I tried not to think about what I would do if I found out Marcel's niceties were a long con. There were a few humans present at the lab, probably to monitor the methods used for research. Sarah, who I recognized as a lingering visitor from the UN First Contact Team, was hunched over a microscope. She seemed to be analyzing some cell samples with a Venlil scientist and waved at us as we entered. "Welcome!" How Sarah sensed us, with her lack of peripheral vision, was beyond me. Here for the behavioral exam? Yep, I think, my roommate grumbled. "Excellent. Just sign the consent form and then speak to Ilya here." Sarah gestured toward the Venlil hovering beside her. "Don't worry, it'll be quick." Marcel hesitated before scrawling his name on the dotted line. I noted how thin and frail his fingers looked. For a predator, they were like spindly twigs. Either my imagination was running amok, or his hands quivered as he set the pen down. The humans looked terrifying to us, but I couldn't picture them going toe-to-toe with the Arxur. Before the ink dried on his signature, Ilya was strapping Marcel to a chair. The restraints seemed excessive for a consensual test. Electrodes were fastened to his skull, and his shirt was removed to tape a series of wires to his chest. Clips placed on his fingers fed additional data to a vitals monitor. I noticed the human growing more agitated, the more equipment he was hooked up to. The rise and fall of his chest had quickened dramatically. "Don't leave, Slanek, please," he pleaded. "This is making me nervous as hell." A sympathetic ache filled my chest cavity. It was strange to think that the predator was afraid of us, but I hated seeing a friend in distress. What were our scientists testing exactly? Guarantees were necessary to cement trust in these creatures, but I was worried about what would be done to achieve that. It looked as though they were planning to elicit a violent reaction from Marcel. Human subjects deserved proper treatment, not to be goaded into retaliation. Why do I feel so protective of him? I mused. I haven't known him that long. It's going to be okay, Mark. I waved my tail reassuringly. They won't hurt you. I promise. The human furrowed his brow. But you'll stay? Of course. I'll be here. Marcel relaxed, and the twinge in my chest deepened. The sentiments I felt in this moment suggested that, despite the inherent risk, it was possible to grow attached to a predator. Whether humanity was sincere in its friendship, or if that was a one-sided delusion, remained to be seen. The patrol ship drifted along the Federation border, dispelling fuel into the endless night. A brooding Marcel sat at the helm, under my supervision. Human pilots had no real-world experience flying ships. Their only insight to interplanetary battles were clumsy simulations back home. Perhaps it was unfair to hurl them into the war out of desperation, as unprepared as they were. I couldn't stop thinking about the results of the experiments and how revolutionary the findings would be when broadcast. Marcel bolted from the lab in a sweat-soaked stupor, and I made a judgment call to give him some time to regain his senses. In his absence, Ilya shared a cumulative AI analysis of all human subjects. A larger sample size was needed to validate the findings, but it was enough to put my mind at ease. We had proof that humans felt empathy. The predators were recorded doing things they claimed to enjoy as a baseline for pleasure, eating sugary snacks, listening to their favorite song, playing games, and so on. A variety of other metrics were assessed for comparison, including boredom and anger. Then they were shown videos of the Arxir torturing our children. Interestingly enough, the regions of their brain that were activated were most similar to the baseline for physical pain, which we determined through finger pricking. Some human participants were so disturbed by the videos that they had to leave the room. That even manifested itself in physical symptoms, such as elevated heart rate and vomiting. Much to my relief, the restraints proved an unnecessary precaution. Venlil xenobiologists were worried that violent footage might trigger predatory instincts, and that humans could experience a lapse in control. They wanted to avoid having to put a Terran subject down. If they lashed out, it was best for everyone's safety. My gaze flickered over to Marcel, curiosity brimming in my chest. The human was evidently lost in thought as well. His face was bright red as he cast a smoldering stare at the floorboards. I was worried he was going to rip his own hair out, with how he was tugging at the coarse auburn strands. Perhaps I should leave it alone, but I was dying to know his thoughts. If I may ask, what frightened you about our scientists? I blurted out. Did you really think they would hurt you? We don't have the same disposition as you. You're going to laugh, but most of our old myths about aliens, yes? Well, they involve us getting abducted and experimented on. Hey, for all I knew, you were testing how humans react to torture. You think we're that barbaric? Our scientists just want to help you fit in. We need conclusive evidence of your empathetic capacity, else we'll never silence the doubters. I don't see why we needed to prove, yet again, that we're not the Arxir. Humans haven't done anything to you. You're a contradiction of hundreds of years of scientific thought, Mark. Not to mention, certain groups in the Federation won't like you, much more than us. They'll demand proof, and I'm not sure even the finest scientific rigor will withstand their scrutiny. It's not fair, I know. The human was silent, directing an intense glare at the scanner feed. The subspace readings were blank, with no indicators of activity beside our own. If there was anything to be gleaned, it wasn't on an empty screen. Maybe the experiments had jarred something in his personality after all, because I never remembered him being so sullen online. If we needed to abandon the patrol and return to base, I'd like to know sooner rather than later, before he endangered himself or others. Are you all right? I patted the human on the shoulder and felt him stiffen beneath my paw. I know that footage disturbed you, and I'm sorry. Marcel sighed. No, I'm sorry. I'm furious, but not with you. I want to wring my hands around an Arxur's neck. I don't see how that would improve anything. At least I'd be doing something. You're here. You're protecting us. Yes. Someone has to put a stop to their reign of terror. There's been no issue recruiting people back on Earth. The way the Greys get off on tormenting children. It sickens us. Why are they like that? I wanted to ask you that, Mark. We believe that predators evolve through warfare. Killing and cruelty. Isn't it a survival advantage to you? Well, killing, yes. Killing the competition, or the dangerous things that lurk in the night. I suppose that's how we became predators. We aren't natural ones, you know. We were once prey animals, same as you, using our cooperation to survive. What? And you chose to be like them? Yep. I won't pretend we're cute and cuddly like you. Some people have walked ghastly paths throughout our history. There's plenty of blood on our hands. But in modern times, we have rules for war called the Geneva Conventions. The Arxur's methods are dishonorable and pathetic. Before I could inquire as to the nature of these Geneva Conventions, shrill alarms blared from the ship's computer. 9 indicators popped up on the scanner feed, suggesting inbound Arxur bombers. The flurry of activity, when the humans arrived, must have piqued their interest. The reptilians loved to target weak links, and an isolated station such as our lodging was just that. There were countermeasures, developed over the centuries, but I didn't know if they'd be sufficient today. Our onboard AI could map the enemy's trajectory, then time a warp disruptor pulse with that information. Once we knocked the Greys out of hyperspace, our directive was to scamper off until reinforcements arrived. Slowing the Arxur's progress bought valuable minutes, even without a confrontation. It could mean the difference between catastrophic loss of life and a successful defense. I switched on the comms link. Prime outpost, we're reading 9 Arxur bombers en route. Figure they have you as their target. Fuck, we have to stop them at all costs. The exhaustion was evident in the male Venlil's voice that answered. I couldn't imagine how much stress the officers were under, monitoring the UN arrivals. The first large transport of humans and a couple hundred wind up dead? They'll never forgive us. They'll never send anyone again. Sir, my human partner can hear you, I said. Oh, right. This is General Com from Venlil Command. We copy you. I'll ask the humans to position their so-called fighters on an intercept course while we evacuate personnel here. Stall for time if you can. I drew a shaky breath. Yes, sir. We'll do our best. Nausea swelled in my throat as I synced the ship computer with the disruptor beacons lining the border. My mind strayed to its usual dark corner, replaying my brother's funeral. The shock was still as fresh as it was months ago when I first learned that his transport ship was gunned down. There wasn't a trace left to remember him by. No body to recover. Would I be the next to fall by the Arxur's claws? Every instinct told me to flee, to put as much distance between us and those monsters as possible. However, the pulses needed to be timed down to the nanosecond, which meant our proximity was a necessity. My brain felt overstimulated, as if my senses were set aflame. Being around a human for hours, it's pushed me to my limit. It's hard to think, with my nerves all frazzled. I pondered with a tinge of guilt. How selfish I am. I haven't even considered how Mark is feeling. I hoped the wordless Marcel was okay with the peril we were in. He had loved ones back on Earth, including a fiancée whom he spoke of with fondness. He didn't want to die here. There was no data on how the primates behaved in life-threatening situations, or how they coped with stress, but with the Greys closing in on our position, there was no time to explain our standard procedure. We thought there'd be time for our allies to settle in before hurling them into the fire. Hopefully, humans had solid self-preservation instincts and could use their cleverness to fill in the blanks. Those bombers were about to become quite real. There were no visible signs of distortion as our pulse detonated. The AI's calculation was silent and flawless. I'd liken FTL disruption to pulling a rug out beneath someone's feet. The warp bubble burst in an instant, plunging the Arxur vessels into real space. No doubt it was disorienting for those hellspawn on board. Watching their angular ships spring forth from nothingness would be a magical sight if the stakes weren't so dire. The bombers slowed to regain their bearings and to scope out their surroundings. They wished to exact revenge on the prey animal who dared to fight back. It was evident Arksur architects spared no thought for beauty. Plasma railguns jutted out on both flanks, perfect for slinging destructive volleys. Turrets for kinetic weapons dotted the armor in case of a close-range engagement. The curvature of the underbelly provided storage for antimatter missiles. I imagine the predators relished the terror their constructs instilled. Witnessing their fleet felt like peering into the jaws of death. "Hideous ships, huh?" I quipped. There was no reply from Marcel. I would suspect he froze in fear if I hadn't seen his hands tighten around the steering column. An uneasy feeling crept into my mind. Every creature handled stress differently, but his behavior was off by a long shot. "Come on, Slanik. The Greys are the threat here," I scolded myself. "Not the human." "Knock, knock. Anyone home?" I tried to keep my voice playful, but I was desperate to snap the human out of his trance. "You do see their ships and realize we're alone? There is safety in numbers. It's time to head back to base." Marcel leaned forward, fangs protruding in a menacing snarl. I noted with abject horror how his eyes dilated, and his canines glistened with saliva. If that was an expression of happiness, why was it appearing when our territory was under siege? "Mark, we need to flee! Now!" I shook the human on the shoulder, but he shrugged me off. "Mark? Shit, man. They definitely spotted us. Marcel! Floor it. I beg you." "Eat this, motherfuckers!" Marcel roared, disregarding me entirely. The human did floor it, to charge in the direction of the Arksur fleet. What happened? He went berserk. He was so lucid minutes ago. I tried to scream a plea to stop, but it came out as an incoherent yelp. The predator either didn't know how, or didn't bother to prime the targeting system. He jammed a clawless finger on the firing trigger, spraying plasma rounds with impunity. The glaring aggression seemed to take the Greys by surprise. It marked a drastic shift from a Venlil's typical flightiness. A few glancing blows struck the lead ship, jolting its pitch. One must have impacted the propulsion system, since its drive plume flickered out. Marcel turned the stream of fire toward the crippled vessel's brethren. Some hits connected at random, though the Arksur seemed more pissed off than wounded. We made a swooping pass across the formation before banking heavily in the direction from which we came. The computer warned me that we had been target-locked by all 9 hostiles. "Run!" I whimpered. Marcel cleared his throat. "Yep, good idea." The human pointed the ship in the direction of the Federation border. Why wasn't he trying to return to the outpost? The last remnants of my logical brain suggested that he was trying to lure the Arksur away. I winced as my harness chafed into my neck. Our inertial dampeners were struggling to keep up with our blistering acceleration. Only 2 Arksur ships gave chase, while the rest returned to their intended course. They couldn't resist sending someone to hunt a straggler down. I knew the enemy bombers would slowly close the gap, with relentless abandon. The optimal way to lose our pursuers was to slip into subspace, but unfortunately, warp required several minutes of stationary preparation. The human signed our death warrant with his stupidity. Our puny ship gunned away from safety with a pair of apex predators in hot pursuit.